Hey guys, in this video lesson we're going to cover the important topic of downstrokes. Now in the last video we covered the topic of match grip and rebound strokes, or legato strokes as they're sometimes called. But this is going to focus specifically on downstrokes. But if you haven't seen that other video, I'll put a link to it right up here and you can go check that out. So what is a downstroke and what is it used for? So downstroke is basically where it's exactly the same as rebound during the initial prep stroke, and as you come down and you impact the head, and then as soon as the stick impacts the head, we basically tap the stick right after that, not before, but right after that impact or contact of the stick on the head, and we keep the stick in the low position, hence the name downstroke, right? So he basically looks like this, right? And this is in contrast to a rebound stroke, which looks like this, right? So downstrokes are not typically used for fast playing, and at least if you're doing consecutive downstrokes. But what is a downstroke used for? Why would we want to tap the stick and disrupt the natural rebound to get the stick in that position? Well, the reason we want to do that, if you think about it, is because if we have any kind of a rudiment or playing passage which requires us to use differing stick heights or stick height contrast, if we need to create contrast from a low stick height to a high stick height, typically what we call accent patterns, and an accent pattern implies that there are low notes as well as high notes. The way we do that is with downstrokes. Now, do we play downstrokes for all accents? No. If we have a series of consecutive accents, let's say they're just eighth notes, right? And these are, let's say they're accented notes, right? The most efficient way to play that, since there are no little notes in between, is to use a rebound stroke. But if we put a low note in between each one of those, say like this, right, then we have to use a downstroke on the accent in this case to prepare the stick to put it in position to efficiently play the tap stroke, which in this case, as you notice, the tap stroke is not just here but there, right? So that's a slightly different tap stroke in this case, because now we're prepping the upstroke for the next accent, since that's what's coming next. So it's kind of like making a quick little check mark on a piece of paper with a pen, except instead of coming off to the side, you come straight back up. And that's effectively what that looks like. So it's a nice little low stroke, 3 or 4 inches maximum in height. You don't want any higher than that typically. And we create, by doing that, a nice wide contrast, which is far more interesting to the end user. So for example, I usually play something like this as a demonstration for my students. If I were to play for you a patches that was like this, and then play it like this, okay, those are exactly the same accents, exactly the same rhythms. Which one sounds more interesting to you? I would bet it's the second one. And the reason it sounds more interesting to you is because we're creating more contrast in the sound. If we simply play the inside notes or the tap notes up high, and we don't differentiate those from the high notes, the accent notes, then it's far less interesting and maybe less readable. Our intent is less obvious to the listener. So that's what downstrokes are for. Now, it's very important with downstrokes. When we're getting the stick in that down position, we're just tapping against the palm of the hand to disrupt the rebound. The most common mistake that young kids make, or students make, doesn't matter what your age is, the most common mistake that players make with downstrokes is they grab the stick, they're over gripping, they put way too much tension in it. And if you remember from our previous video, when you put tension or extra grip on the stick, you are actually robbing the stroke of acceleration. Instead of getting a big accent sound, you will actually make it much less impactful by reducing the amount of acceleration that goes into the stroke. So the key thing with downstrokes is, I like to use the terms point and relax. All right, and point, you have to have both of those elements for this to be an effectively executed downstroke. So point means we want to point the stick into the head, because as you may recall from the previous lesson, we want this sort of slightly downward point into the drum head. We want this orientation to the stick, to the drum head, right? So we want to think point and relax. Now relax is telling you to not overgrip the stick. So when we play this, right, we're thinking point and we are relaxing the hand. Now what's really going on is as soon as the stick hits the drum head, we are just momentarily tapping it into the palm and keeping the hand relaxed. That's really all it takes to disrupt that natural rebound. So you're only pulling the hand in for just the briefest of moments, and it's a very relaxed approach. The minute you overgrip that, the minute it becomes much more difficult to execute anything cleanly after that. It takes a while to relax the hand, so you don't want to tense it up in the first place. So I've got an exercise that gives you the ability to sort of practice this technique. Now you could do the basic accent tap exercise, which is basically where you play a set of 8 notes and then you accent on the downbeat. So you play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Right? Now I inadvertently, out of sheer habit, switched to traditional grip. I'm going to go back to matched. That was unintentional. So if you're already an experienced traditional grip player, feel free to use traditional grip. But I'm at this point still kind of focused on match grip for the purposes of this lesson. All right? But we want to, in this case, think point, relax. That's really at the top of our sort of mental checklist as we're thinking about this, because the orientation of the stick, we need to get that position right there before we go on to the tap. Right? If we are ending up here where the stick has a slight upward point to it, and we're already 6 inches off the head, we did not get the point. We may or may not have gotten the relax part of it, right? But you got to have both, or your tap heights are going to be too high. So where you end up here, you can be sort of flat as long as you're not more than about 3 inches off the head. But where the stick ends up after the downstroke determines largely what the tap height is going to look at, or the unaccented note is going to look like. And again, we want that note to be controlled at a very precise height. Now it might be 3 inches, it might be 6 inches, depending on what you're being asked to play. It really varies. But for the purposes of building this technique, we are going to sort of push that to the extreme side and say 3 or 4 inches maximum. Right? Now, so as I mentioned, just to reiterate, there are times when your tap height may need to be higher than that, or you're being asked to play something where the lower notes tend to be a little bit more elevated. But in this case, we're talking about building this accent tap technique, this downstroke approach. And in order to do that, we want to exaggerate that and play that in a more of a traditional 3 to 4 inch tap height. So the exercise that I'm going to teach, and again, you'll find this on drummingwithdray.com, is called 4-3-2. I'm going to hold that up to the camera just a sec. Hopefully it'll focus. But you can find this on the website as a PDF, and you can download it. And essentially, what it's doing is it's asking you to play a series of 8 notes, accented 8 notes, that gives you a little bit of time in between each accent. And at the front end, 4 notes in particular, that's the 4 and the 4-3-2. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And you come back up on the 4th one. And we do 4 of those, right? So each segment of this, we're going to do 4 of those. And we'll do 4 on each hand. And then we do 4 threes, which is going to be 1, 2, 3. We come up on the 3. We do 4 of those on each hand. And then we do 4 twos, 1, 2, right? So I'm going to do this with a metronome, and I'm going to do this really slow. And you should do this slow as well. If you haven't mastered the point relax position, where the downstroke is ending up in this position right here, if you haven't mastered that yet, don't try to do this exercise until you've done some reps, and just work on that, making sure that you're not over gripping as you do that. Now I'll throw this out there as a bit of a quick little quiz question. What's the difference between downstroke or staccato stroke and rebound stroke? Is the upstroke different? The prep stroke? No, it's not different at all. What about when we come down? Is that any different than rebound? No. What about when it hits the head? No, exactly the same. It's what happens the instant after the stick contacts the head. Rebound lets it come back up, and we open the hand and let the hand move with the stick. Downstroke, we tap it into the palm, we're pointing and relaxing into that position, and we are keeping the stick remaining in that unrebounded position. Right? That's the only difference. Everything else about that stroke, the upstroke, the downstroke, where it hits the head, all of that is exactly the same. All right, so we're going to use the metronome, and I'm going to play this exercise. We're going to do it slow, but I do, as I said, I want to reiterate that you should make sure you're getting some pretty reliable, consistent downstrokes without even adding the little notes yet, the little tap notes, before you start going on to the exercise. But if you think you're ready to go into the exercise, by all means, go run that down. So again, you'll find that on drummingwithdray.com. And I'll put a link in the description below to get you right to that particular post if you'd like to see that. In the meantime, let me put the metronome on. I'm going to start it at 60 beats a minute, which is probably a good starting point. Gives you plenty of time in between notes to really sort of consciously do and place every note that you're playing, because consistency and technique is how we build muscle memory. So we want to make sure we're doing it the right way every time. So we got to play it slow enough to begin with to ensure that we can do that. Because if we're playing it and we're getting other motions in there, other techniques bleeding in that we did not intend because we're playing it too fast, guess what? We're either creating bad muscle memory or we're creating confused muscle memory. We're not really building any consistency. So that's the name of the game, which is why you have to start slow. So here we go, 60 beats a minute. So I'm feeling that point relax with each accent. Point relax. These are the threes. Point relax. Now the twos. And just like we did with the rebound stroke exercise, before we break, we want to make sure we ended up right where we started. Right? We're checking our angles, making sure we're not dropping the fingers, doing anything weird. We're also checking our tension level. Did we tighten up the shoulders while we played? Right? Did we poke the elbows out? Did weird things start happening? We want to take note of that so we can add it to our mental checklist. And the next time we play, the next rep we do, we can kind of cycle through those things. You know, am I getting the point relax? What am I tensing the shoulders? Am I over gripping? Because that's a big one. Because that'll be one of the most common things you do on the point relax. You'll get so intent on getting the point that you forget to relax, and we're over gripping the stick. Now, one last thing before I go, I want you to notice I am playing on, this is like a Vader practice pad, or off-world, Vader off-world practice pad, which, by the way, I love these because they have the rim and they're virtually indestructible, so you don't have to replace the playing surface at all. Anyway, enough as a sales pitch. They're not paying me to say this. This is one of my favorite practice pads. But one thing that you can do with a practice pad like this that you can't do so easily when you're playing on a drum, and this is not to say that I always prefer playing on a pad instead of a drum, not true, but there is a benefit to playing on a pad, and that is you can hear stick tone when we're playing rebounds and downstrokes. So you should hear the stick tone, right? And I don't know if you'll be able to pick this up in the audio, but I'm going to attempt to demonstrate, right? You should be able to pick up that sort of resonant tone, especially if I'm doing rebounds, right? If I overgrip the stick, we lose all of that tone. And if we're doing downstroke correctly, and we're just tapping the minimum amount in the hand to disrupt that natural rebound, we should get the same effect. Even with downstroke, we should still hear that stick tone. It should sound like, right? Versus, and again, I don't know if you can really hear that, but if you try this on your own, I really want you to pay attention to listening to, am I hearing that stick tone like you can clearly hear with the rebounds, or am I getting a flat tone? Right? If I'm getting a flat tone, I'm probably overgripping. And guess what happens when you overgrip? Okay, we've already talked about this. When you overgrip, you rob that stroke of acceleration. And when you do that, we get less force or less weight in the sound, right? So if somebody tells me I need to play louder, I need to dig in, I need to play through the head, and my response to that is to squeeze tighter as I play, I'm not going to get the result that I want. I'm probably going to get the opposite result of the result that I want. I'm going to get less weight in the sound, right? So it's important. So if I'm playing tight-handed, right? I'm trying to muscle that in. Listen to how much sound I'm generating, right? Now let me relax the hands. I'm literally exerting 50% of the effort, and I'm still producing more sound. right? Because I'm creating more acceleration in the stroke by being relaxed. All right, so I hope you found that helpful. From here, we're going to start getting into some additional topics and rudiments and things like that. Various techniques that I think you will enjoy, and it will advance your skills as a competitive core style drummer. And oh, by the way, even though I talk about this being aimed at core style drumming, which is true, the techniques that I'm talking about here apply even in a non-competitive, non-core style type environment. So you can play drum set with this technique, you can play concert percussion with this technique. It doesn't mean you just have to use it for competitive core style drumming, but it is primarily required for core style drumming. It's not required for the other things, but it will certainly set you up with better technique foundation if you approach those other types of playing with the same kind of technique. So anyway, that's all we got for you in this lesson. I ran a little bit past what I intended to do, but I hope you found it helpful. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If this is the kind of thing that you like, please consider subscribing, and we will see you in the next lesson.